Everyone believed the billionaire's baby had been born blind. The doctors at the best hospitals confirmed it. The specialists all shook their heads and said nothing could be done. And his own father, the powerful billionaire Marcus Thorne, had finally lost all hope. For 8 months, the baby Leo lived in a world of total silence and darkness. He never reacted to the bright, colorful toys his father bought. He never smiled when his father held him close. He never cried. His eyes were wide open, but they saw nothing. But then a new maid was hired. Her name was Clara, and she had no medical training. She was not a specialist or a doctor. She was just there to dust the furniture and clean the giant, empty rooms. But Clara noticed something. One small, tiny detail that everyone else had missed. A detail that would uncover a terrible secret and change all of their lives forever. Before we find out what Clara saw, make sure you subscribe to our channel and like this video. And don't forget to comment below telling us where you are watching from. We love to hear from you. After the private plane crash that took his wife, Eliza, Marcus Thorne locked himself inside his massive, cold mansion. The house sat on top of a lonely hill, looking down at a city he no longer wanted to be a part of. Marcus was one of the richest men in the world, but his money meant nothing. He refused to see his friends. He ignored all business calls. The only thing that mattered to him, the only reason he got out of bed, was his baby boy, Leo. But Leo was broken. The doctors told Marcus that the baby's eyes did not respond to light. "It's a complete and permanent blindness," they said, their voices full of pity. The news was like a second death for Marcus. First his wife and now his son, lost to him in a different way. From that day on, Marcus did everything for the baby himself. He fed him every bottle. He changed every diaper. He gently bathed him every single night. He refused to hire a nanny. He never left the house. His entire world was now inside the walls of the nursery. But Leo gave nothing back. The baby would just sit quietly in his arms, his body soft but lifeless. He didn't cry. He didn't laugh. His beautiful little face was always blank. His wide, blue eyes stared straight ahead, looking at nothing. It was like the baby didn't even know his father was there. Marcus felt like he was screaming in a room where no one could hear him. He filled the nursery with the most expensive toys. There were bright red and yellow blocks, stuffed animals that sang songs, and mobiles that spun with sparkling lights. Leo never reacted. He just sat still and silent. Every morning, Marcus would walk to Leo's crib and pick him up. "Good morning, Leo," he would whisper, his voice heavy. He would open the giant curtains, flooding the room with bright sunlight, hoping to see his son squint or turn away. Nothing. He would talk to Leo softly while changing him. "We're going to have a good day today, Leo." "Yes, we are." Nothing. He would shake a loud, colorful rattle right in front of Leo's face, begging for a smile, a blink, or even a frown. The baby never responded. His head might tilt a little, but there was no sign that he saw or heard. His face was like a calm, empty lake. Marcus started to worry that maybe Leo couldn't hear either. But the doctors had checked. "His hearing is perfect, Mr. Thorne." "Then why doesn't he react?" Marcus pleaded. The doctors had no answer. Marcus played soft piano music. He sang songs his wife used to love. He even tried speaking in different languages, hoping a new sound might get through. Nothing worked. Leo just sat or lay quietly, his eyes wide but empty, like a beautiful doll trapped inside himself. Marcus didn't know if Leo even knew who he was. Did he know he was being held? Did he feel the warmth of a hug? Did he know he was loved? These questions played in Marcus's mind all day and all night. He got no answers. Only more silence. The mansion, which was once filled with Eliza's laughter and parties, now felt like a giant, polished tomb. The only sound was the echo of Marcus's lonely footsteps on the marble floors. The baby monitor on his desk was always quiet. No crying, no babbling. Just awful, heavy silence. Marcus would walk past rooms that were perfectly clean and never used. The living room was filled with Leo's toys, but none of them were ever played with. The nursery was decorated with bright colors and happy cartoon animals on the walls, but it all felt like a lie. It was a happy room for a baby who felt no happiness. The baby didn't look at anything. He never reached for anything. It was like he had no curiosity about the world. Marcus would sit in the rocking chair for hours just watching Leo, searching for any sign of life. A twitch of the finger, a small smile, a single tear. Nothing ever came. Every night, Marcus would carry Leo upstairs, bathe him gently and read him storybooks. He knew Leo couldn't see the pictures. He wasn't even sure he could hear the words. But he kept doing it. It was the only thing he could do. His deep sadness over his wife's death was now mixed with a terrible frustration. He never thought he would have to raise a child alone. And now he was alone with a child who couldn't connect with the world. He felt like he was failing. Am I doing something wrong? He would ask himself late at night, staring at his computer. He searched the internet for miracle cures. He ordered new sensory toys, new light machines, new sound machines, anything that promised a breakthrough. When the boxes arrived, he would rip them open, full of hope. But they made no difference. Leo never reacted. Marcus was a man who had built an empire. He was used to being in control. He was strong, confident, and always had the answer. Now he was just a broken man, alone in a dark house, holding a silent baby. He felt completely powerless. Some days he would cry silently while holding Leo. Other days he just felt numb. He would look at the photos of his smiling wife and whisper to her, "Eliza, what am I supposed to do? He's all I have left of you. And I'm losing him." The next week, a small, worn-out bus stopped at the huge iron gates at the bottom of the long driveway. A woman stepped off, holding a single suitcase. Her name was Clara. She looked up at the massive white mansion on the hill. It looked like a palace in a fairy tale, but it felt cold even in the sunshine. A driver in a black suit picked her up and drove her to the front door without saying a word. When Clara stepped inside, the silence hit her like a wall. The house was too quiet. There was no music, no voices, no sound of life at all. A tall woman in a strict black uniform greeted her. "I am Mrs. Finch, the head housekeeper. You are late." "The bus was slow, ma'am," Clara said softly. Mrs. Finch just stared at her. "Mr. Thorne demands perfection and silence. Your duties are to clean. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not enter Mr. Thorne's private office. And you will not, under any circumstances, disturb the baby." Clara nodded, her heart sinking. This place felt more like a prison than a home. Mrs. Finch gave her a quick tour. The kitchen, the laundry room, the dining room. Everything was spotless, shiny, and looked like it had never been used. This house is a museum, Clara thought to herself. Clara was shown to her small room in the back of the house. It was simple and clean. It was enough for her. She had come here to work and to be alone. She had her own reasons. Clara didn't talk about her past. No one here asked, and she didn't want to tell them. But inside, she was carrying a sadness just as heavy as Marcus's. 6 months ago, Clara's own newborn son had passed away. The doctor said they didn't know why. One night he was warm in her arms and the next morning he was cold. Since then her world had ended. She left her apartment. She stopped talking to her friends. She couldn't stand their sad looks. When she saw the job for a live-in maid in a faraway mansion, she took it. It was a way to escape, a place to hide from her memories and her pain. As she unpacked her few clothes, she held onto a single, tiny, knitted blue bootie. She held it to her chest, closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She would not cry. She was here to work. The next day, Clara was assigned to clean the main living room. She quietly dusted the polished tables and folded blankets. And then she saw them. Baby toys. They were scattered all over a soft playmat. A small red ball, a stuffed bear, some plastic blocks. She bent down and started picking them up. And that's when she saw him. Across the room, sitting in the middle of the mat, was the baby. Leo. He didn't move. He just sat there holding a small toy car in one hand. His eyes were wide open but completely unfocused. His body was perfectly still. Clara froze. She had been around babies her whole life. Even quiet babies fidget. They look around. They make small sounds. This baby was like a statue. Clara stayed quiet and just watched him. The baby didn't seem to know she was there. She looked at his tiny hands and his blank face, and a strange, cold feeling ran down her back. Just then Mrs. Finch walked back into the room and saw Clara staring. "That is Leo," Mrs. Finch said, her voice flat. "Mr. Thorne's son. Do not try to play with him. He doesn't respond." "What's wrong with him?" Clara whispered. "He's blind," Mrs. Finch said as if she were talking about the weather. "The doctors all confirmed it. It's a tragedy. Now get back to work." Mrs. Finch walked away. Clara stood still for a moment longer. Her eyes kept going back to the baby. He hadn't moved. Not even an inch. The toy car hung loosely from his fingers. Clara wanted to run over. To pick him up, to hold him. But she remembered the rules. She slowly went back to her cleaning, but her mind was stuck on the child. Something was wrong here. She didn't know what it was. But the boy didn't just look blind. He looked lost. That night, Clara lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling. She could not get the image of Leo's face out of her mind. Blank, calm, and completely disconnected. It reminded her of something. A memory she tried to push away every single day. Her own baby. During those last few hours, he had looked just like that. Clara turned onto her side and pulled the blanket up tight. She had come here to be quiet, to clean, to disappear. But as she lay there in the dark, she felt a powerful pull toward the silent baby. She couldn't explain it. Something about that little boy wouldn't let her go. She didn't know it yet, but she was the only person who could help him. And she was the only one who would discover the truth. For the next few days, Clara followed the rules perfectly. She cleaned the endless marble floors. She dusted the untouched, expensive furniture. She stayed silent. But every time she was in the main living room, her eyes went straight to Leo. He was always in the same spot. Sitting on his soft playmat, surrounded by toys he never touched. He was the quietest baby she had ever seen. The other staff members moved around him as if he were a piece of furniture. They would bring him his bottle, feed him, and take him away to be changed, all with a sad, distant look in their eyes. They had all accepted that Leo was lost. But Clara couldn't. She saw the tiny blue veins under his pale skin. She saw the way a single dark eyelash rested on his cheek. He was so perfect, so beautiful. Her heart ached for him. This ache was familiar. It was the same dark, empty space her own son had left behind. She started to quietly watch him, memorizing his non-routine. He didn't have one. He just existed. He never turned his head toward a sound. He never reached out. He never made a single noise. Clara felt a strange connection to him. She was a woman invisible with grief, hiding in a new job. He was a baby invisible in his own home, locked inside a body that wouldn't respond. One afternoon, Marcus Thorne came down the main staircase. Clara had only seen him from a distance. He looked like a ghost. His expensive suit was wrinkled, and his face was covered in a rough beard. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. He walked over to Leo and picked him up. "Hey, son," he mumbled, his voice thick with sadness. Clara watched from the hallway, pretending to dust a vase. Marcus held Leo close, rocking him back and forth. "I miss her so much, Leo," he whispered, his voice breaking. I don't know what to do." Leo's head rested on his father's shoulder. His blank, open eyes stared at the wall behind him. He didn't cuddle. He didn't move. Marcus held him for another minute, his shoulders shaking, and then he gently placed Leo back on the mat. He didn't even look at the toys. He just turned and walked slowly back up the stairs, his footsteps echoing in the giant, empty house. Clara's heart broke. It wasn't just the baby who was lost. The father was too. A few days later, Mrs. Finch found Clara finishing her work in the kitchen. "Mr. Thorne is unwell today," Mrs. Finch said, her voice tight. "He will not be coming out of his office. You will be responsible for feeding and bathing the baby tonight." Clara's heart suddenly started to beat faster. "Me? Ma'am?" Mrs. Finch gave her a cold look. "You have been around babies, correct? Your file said so." Clara swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. His bath is at 7 o'clock. Do not use too much soap. The water must be lukewarm, not hot. And do not be loud. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mrs. Finch." That evening, Clara walked into the nursery. It was the first time she had been inside. It was a beautiful room, painted light blue with fluffy white clouds on the ceiling. A giant, empty crib stood in the corner. Leo was on his playmat just as he always was. Clara's hands were trembling slightly. She walked over and knelt in front of him. "Hello, Leo," she whispered. He didn't move. "My name is Clara. I'm going to give you your bath now, okay?" She gently slid her hands under his small body and lifted him. He was light, but his body was limp, like a doll. It was a feeling she remembered all too well. She pushed the painful memory away and focused. She carried him to the master bathroom, where a small white plastic tub sat on the huge marble counter. She filled it with warm water, just as she was told, and tested it with her elbow. Perfect. She carefully undressed him, unbuttoning his soft cotton onesie. His little arms and legs were thin. She gently lowered him into the water, holding his head supported with one hand. He didn't flinch. He didn't splash. He didn't react to the warm water at all. His face stayed blank, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Clara felt a wave of sadness wash over her. "Oh, you poor sweet boy," she whispered. She reached for the soft sponge and the bottle of baby soap. She put a tiny drop on the sponge and began to wash his arms and belly, her movements slow and gentle. She worked in silence, the only sound the soft splashing of the water. She kept talking to him, her voice quiet and soothing. "This must feel nice, Nice and warm." She saved his face for last. She got a clean washcloth, dipped it in the warm water and gently wiped his forehead. Then she took the sponge, which still had a tiny bit of soap foam on it. She lightly dabbed his cheeks. Some of the white, bubbly foam slid down and touched the outer corner of his left eye. And then, it happened. Leo blinked. It was tiny. It was fast. It was almost nothing. Clara's hand froze in midair. Her whole body went still. She stared at his face. Did I imagine that? He was back to staring at the ceiling, perfectly still. No, she whispered to herself. I saw it. I know I did. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She looked at the sponge. It was the foam. It must have been the foam. With a shaking hand, she gathered a tiny bit more foam on her finger. She held her breath. She gently dabbed the foam near the corner of his other eye. She watched him. 1 second. 2 seconds. He blinked again. And then a small sound came from his throat. Mm. It was quiet, almost like a tiny sigh. But it was a sound. His mouth had moved. His lips had parted. Clara gasped, dropping the sponge into the water with a splash. She stared at him, her eyes wide. He wasn't imagining it. This was real. Leo stayed still, but Clara thought, she could swear, his eyes had shifted. Just a tiny, tiny bit. Not fully looking at her, but not fully empty either. For a split second it felt like he was present. She didn't speak. She didn't want to break the spell. She just watched him, her mind racing a million miles an hour. The doctor said he was blind. The specialists gave up. Mr. Thorne had lost hope. Mrs. Finch said he doesn't respond. But he did. He had responded. He responded to her. She slowly, carefully finished the bath, her hands still shaking. She rinsed the soap from his hair, lifted him out and wrapped him in a big fluffy towel. She held him close, patting him dry. His head rested against her arm. She just stared at his face, hoping to see it again. A blink. A sound. Anything. But Leo was gone again. He was back to his blank, doll-like state. Still, it wasn't the same. Clara couldn't explain it, but she felt it in her chest. That wasn't a random muscle twitch. It was a reaction. She dressed him in a clean onesie, her mind spinning. What did this mean? Could he see? Maybe not see, but feel? She carried him back to the nursery and placed him in his crib. He lay on his back, eyes open to the ceiling, perfectly silent. Clara stood over the crib for a long time just watching. This baby wasn't just silent. He was locked away. And she had just found a key. Something as simple as soap foam near his eye. She knew in that moment that she couldn't tell anyone. Who would believe her? A new maid telling the billionaire and his team of expert doctors that they were all wrong? She would be fired on the spot. She looked down at Leo. A terrible, cold thought entered her mind. What if someone knew? No. She pushed the thought away. It was too crazy. It must have been a mistake. The doctors were just wrong. She had to be sure. She couldn't say a word until she was 100% sure. She would have to test him again. Tomorrow. And the next day. She would keep this a secret, her secret and Leo's, until she knew the truth. The next morning, Clara woke up before her alarm. Her mind had been racing all night. He blinked. He made a sound. The memory played over and over. She got dressed in her plain black uniform, her hands feeling clumsy. She felt like a spy, like she was carrying a huge, fragile secret. She went downstairs and started her duties. Dust the hallway. Polish the silver. Clean the endless windows. But her mind wasn't on her work. Her thoughts were in the nursery. Every sound made her jump. She kept expecting Mrs. Finch to appear and tell her she had done something wrong. She felt like her secret was written all over her face. She found herself making excuses to be near the living room, where Leo sat on his mat. She dusted a single vase for 10 minutes, just watching him from the corner of her eye. He was just as he always was, still, silent, blank. Doubt began to creep in. Did I imagine it? The house was so quiet, so sad, it felt like a place that could make you see things that weren't there. Maybe the warm water and the steam had played tricks on her eyes. Maybe the sound was just a sigh or a hiccup. No, she wouldn't believe that. Her own grief had made her senses sharp, not dull. She knew what she saw. She had to try again. She couldn't wait until bath time. She looked around. The hallway was empty. Mrs. Finch was downstairs in the kitchen. Mr. Thorne was, as always, locked in his office. Clara walked into the living room, her cleaning rag in her hand. She knelt beside the playmat, pretending to wipe the floor. Leo was sitting just inches away, staring at nothing. "Hello, Leo," she whispered, so quietly it was almost just a breath. No reaction. Her heart sank. Maybe it was just a fluke. She looked around again. She was still alone. She reached into the pocket of her apron. Earlier, she had pocketed a heavy, shiny silver spoon from the kitchen. Her hand was shaking. She slowly pulled it out. She held it up, letting the bright morning sunlight from the giant window hit the metal. A sharp, bright reflection of light danced on the wall. Clara slowly moved the spoon, making the light dance. She moved it from the wall, closer, closer, until the spot of light was on the floor right in front of Leo's feet. He didn't move. She moved it up onto his legs. Nothing. She moved it onto his chest. Nothing. Her hope was turning to ash. She felt stupid. Of course the doctors were right. Who was she, a simple maid, to question them? She sighed, feeling the familiar sting of tears in her eyes. She was about to put the spoon away, but she tried one last time. She flicked her wrist, making the light flash quickly right across his face. Not in his eyes but near them. Flash, flash, flash. His left eyelid twitched. It was so small she almost missed it. She did it again. Flash. Another twitch. She let out a shaky breath. It wasn't the foam. It was light. He was reacting to light. The doctors were wrong. They were all wrong. He wasn't completely blind. A cold, dark thought, like a snake, slithered into her mind. If he wasn't blind, then why did everyone say he was? Why was he given up on so easily? Clara. Clara screamed, dropping the spoon with a loud clang on the marble floor. She spun around. Mrs. Finch was standing right behind her, her arms crossed. Her face was like stone. "What are you doing?" Mrs. Finch asked, her voice dangerously quiet. I dropped a spoon, ma'am," Clara stammered, her heart hammering against her ribs. She quickly snatched the spoon off the floor. I was just cleaning it." Mrs. Finch's eyes were like ice. They looked from Clara's bright red face to the baby. Leo was, as usual, perfectly still. The noise hadn't startled him at all. "You are not paid to play with spoons," Mrs. Finch said. "And you are not paid to sit on the floor. Get back to your work. Now." "Yes, ma'am." "Sorry, ma'am." Clara scrambled to her feet and practically ran from the room. She spent the rest of the day in a state of terror. Mrs. Finch was watching her. She felt her eyes on her back as she cleaned the dining room. She saw her shadow in the hallway. Clara knew she was in trouble. She had been caught. Mrs. Finch was suspicious. That evening, Clara was in the kitchen washing vegetables for the cook. She was sure Mrs. Finch would not let her near Leo again. She was probably already telling Mr. Thorne that the new maid was crazy, that she was bothering the baby. But at 6:45 p.m. Mrs. Finch walked into the kitchen. "Clara," she said, her voice clipped, "it is time for the baby's bath. Do not be late. And this time do your job. Bathe him. Do not play. Do not drop things. Am I clear?" Clara was shocked. She was still allowed to bathe him? "Yes, Mrs. Finch. Perfectly clear." "Good." Mrs. Finch turned and left. Clara's mind was spinning. Why would Mrs. Finch let her bathe him again if she was so suspicious? Maybe she didn't see the light. Maybe she really just thought Clara was a clumsy, stupid maid. A tiny bit of hope returned. This was her chance. Her last chance. She had to be faster. She had to be smarter. She had to get more proof. At 7 o'clock on the dot, she walked into the nursery. This time she didn't hesitate. She picked Leo up, her movements quick and sure. "Okay, Leo," she whispered into his ear. "It's time to show me the truth." She carried him to the master bathroom. She didn't turn on the bright overhead lights. Instead, she just used the small dim lamp by the sink. The room was warm and shadowy. She locked the door. It was a flimsy little latch, but it was something. "Please don't let anyone come in," she prayed. She filled the tub and lowered him in. His body was limp. His eyes were blank. "Don't do this to me, Leo," she pleaded in a whisper. "Please. I know you're in there." She got the soap. She got the foam. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the sponge. She took a deep breath. "Here we go." She put a small bit of foam on her finger and dabbed it, very gently, near the corner of his eye. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3. Nothing. A cold dread filled her. No, please." She tried again with a little more foam. She touched the skin right at the corner of his eye. Blink. A huge, shaky sigh of relief escaped her. "Thank you," she cried softly. "Thank you." She did it again. Blink. Okay. She was not crazy. Now for the real test. "Can you see Leo? Can you see me?" She dipped her hand in the sudsy water, gathering a big clump of white bubbles. She held her hand up in front of his face, about a foot away. "Look, Leo. Look at the bubbles." He just stared past her at the ceiling. "Please, Leo. Look." She moved her foamy hand slowly from the right side to the left, passing right in front of his eyes. Nothing. She did it again. Right to left. Nothing. She tried again, this time from left to right. Nothing. Clara felt her hope crumble. Maybe it was just a reflex. Just his nerves reacting to the soap. Maybe he was blind after all, and she was just a desperate, grieving woman seeing what she wanted to see. She felt tears well up. She had been so sure. She had risked her job for this. She let her hand drop, defeated. The bubbles fell from her fingers and landed on the water with a soft plop. She went to grab the washcloth to finish the bath. She was done. It was over. But as she reached for the cloth, her hand, still shiny with water, passed in front of his face again. And his eyes moved. She froze. She looked at her hand. She looked at his eyes. She slowly, so slowly, moved her hand from left to right. His little blue eyes followed her hand. It was jerky. It was wobbly. But he was watching her. "Oh my God," Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, Leo. You can see. You can see." Tears streamed down her face, but this time they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of pure, shocking joy. "You can see," she laughed, wiping her eyes. "I knew it. I knew you were in there." She was so lost in the moment, so completely focused on the baby's miraculous, moving eyes, that she didn't hear the click of the weak latch on the door. She didn't hear the door swing open. "What?" a low, furious voice snarled. "Is going on in here?" Clara's blood turned to ice. She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Mr. Thorne was standing in the doorway. His face was not sad. It was dark with a terrifying rage. His eyes weren't empty. They were blazing. He wasn't looking at the baby. He was staring with pure hatred right at Clara. "I gave one rule," he whispered, his voice shaking with anger. "One rule. Do not disturb the baby." Clara's mind went blank. She couldn't speak. She couldn't move. She just knelt there, dripping water on the floor, holding the baby who had just proven he wasn't blind. Mr. Thorne. Please," she stammered. He blinked, she finally managed to say, her voice a tiny, shaking whisper. "Sir, you don't understand." He blinked. He saw me. Mr. Thorne's face twisted into a snarl. "He what?" "He can see." Clara cried, the words tumbling out of her. "I know it sounds crazy, but the doctors are wrong. He followed my hand. I just saw him do it. Look." She turned back to Leo, desperate, and waved her hand in front of his face. "See, Leo? Show him. Show your daddy." But Leo, startled by the new, loud, angry voice, had shut down. His eyes were blank again. He was staring at the ceiling. He didn't move. "Show me," Clara begged, her voice breaking. "Please, Leo, show him." Leo did nothing. Clara looked back at Mr. Thorne, her face a mask of desperation. "Get your hands off my son," he said, his voice deadly calm. "But sir, I'm telling you the truth." Get out," he roared, pointing a shaking finger at the door. "You are fired. Get out of my house. Now. Get out." Mr. Thorne's voice echoed off the cold marble of the bathroom, hitting Clara like a slap. His face was a terrifying mask of rage, his eyes blazing with a pain so deep it looked like hatred. He had taken a step forward, his body tense, his hands balled into fists. "No, please," Clara cried, her voice high and desperate. She was still kneeling on the wet floor, holding the sponge. "Mr. Thorne, I am not lying to you. He saw me. He followed my hand." "You're cruel," he whispered, and the quiet word was worse than his shout. "You come into my home, you see a grieving man, a broken child, and you decide to, what? Play a game? Give me false hope? Is that it?" "No. It's not false. I saw it." She turned back to Leo, who was still sitting silently in the tub. The moment was gone. The connection was broken. He was just a blank, beautiful doll again, staring at the ceiling, oblivious to the man roaring and the woman crying. "Leo, please," Clara begged, waving her wet hand in front of his face. "Show him. Show your daddy. Look at my hand." Leo didn't even blink. The fight went out of Clara all at once. Her shoulders slumped. A sob escaped her chest. She had seen it. She knew she had seen it. But the proof was gone, vanished into the same empty place the baby went to hide. "You're sick," Mr. Thorne spat out. He stepped forward and roughly pulled the large, fluffy towel from the rack, his movements jerky. "You're preying on us." "Mrs. Finch," he roared, turning his head toward the open door. "Mrs. Finch." Get in here. Clara flinched. She heard the sound of fast, heavy footsteps on the marble floor outside. Mrs. Finch appeared in the doorway, her face pale but her eyes sharp, taking in the scene instantly. Clara kneeling on the floor, the baby in the tub, and Mr. Thorne shaking with fury. "Sir? Get her out of my sight," he ordered, his voice flat and dead. "She is fired. I want her out of this house in 10 minutes. But sir..." Clara tried, scrambling to her feet. I saw. My son is blind," Mr. Thorne roared, finally turning his full rage on her. "The best doctors in the world said so. What makes you think you, a maid, know better? What, you have a magic touch? You found a miracle in a bottle of soap." He laughed, a short, bitter, ugly sound. Clara had no words. He was right. It sounded insane. "I warned you, girl," Mrs. Finch said, her voice dripping with cold satisfaction. She stepped forward and grabbed Clara's upper arm, her fingers digging in like claws. "I told you not to disturb the baby." "Please," Clara whispered, looking back at Mr. Thorne. He wouldn't look at her. He had turned his back, his broad shoulders hiding the baby as he lifted Leo from the water. All she could see was his back, a solid wall of grief and anger. He was wrapping his son in the towel, shielding him, protecting him from her. "Come," Mrs. Finch said and yanked. Clara stumbled, forced to follow. Mrs. Finch marched her out of the bathroom and into the long, grand hallway. The house was silent again, but this time the silence felt deafening, like the air after a bomb. Clara was crying openly now, hot tears streaming down her face. "I'm not lying," she sobbed as Mrs. Finch dragged her down the hall. "I wouldn't lie about that. I saw him." "Be quiet," Mrs. Finch hissed, her face pinched. "You've done enough. You're lucky Mr. Thorne doesn't call the police." Waking him up, shouting, upsetting that poor child. "He wasn't upset," Clara insisted. He was awake. He was..." "Silence," Mrs. Finch snapped. "You will go to your room, pack your single, pathetic bag, and I will walk you to the gate myself." They passed the nursery. The door was open. The room was dark except for the small, soft glow of a nightlight. Clara, in her despair, turned her head to look one last time at the room that held the little boy. And that's when she saw it. On a small wooden table next to the rocking chair, bathed in the dim light, was a tray. On the tray was a small, dark brown glass bottle with a white dropper cap. Next to it was a white prescription box. "Eye drops." The thought hit Clara so hard she stopped walking, yanking her arm out of Mrs. Finch's grasp. "What now?" Mrs. Finch snarled. Clara stared into the dark room. Why would a blind baby need eye drops? 1,000 thoughts exploded in her mind at once. The doctor said he was blind. Mr. Thorne had followed their orders. Mrs. Finch had said, "He doesn't respond." The baby was always the same. Blank. Empty. So. Except at bath time. When had she given the bath? At 7 o'clock. At night. When did she test him with the spoon? In the morning. And his reaction was tiny, a small twitch. But at night? His eyes followed her. It was a crazy, impossible idea. What if the drops were given in the morning? What if they were strong? And what if, by 7 p.m. after a long 12-hour day, they were starting to wear off? "He didn't just react to the foam," Clara whispered, her voice full of a new, terrifying awe. "He reacted because it was night. He reacted because the medicine was gone." "What are you muttering about?" Mrs. Finch snapped, grabbing her arm again, harder this time. "Are you mad? Get moving." She shoved Clara toward the back hallway that led to the staff quarters. But Clara wasn't just a crying, defeated girl anymore. Her mind was sharp, clear, and filled with a cold, terrifying purpose. The doctors weren't just wrong. This wasn't just a mistake. This was something else. Mrs. Finch pushed Clara into her small, plain room. 10 minutes, she said, her voice final. "I will be outside this door. If you are not ready, I will have the driver remove you physically." The door slammed shut. The lock clicked. Clara stood in the middle of the room, her heart hammering not from fear, but from a wild, horrible, world-changing idea. They're drugging him. They were giving a baby eye drops that kept his eyes from reacting. They were making him blind. She looked at the door. Mrs. Finch was out there. Mr. Thorne was in his office, lost in his anger. The baby was probably back in his crib. The house was quiet. She had to see that bottle. She had to read the label. She had to know what it was. She looked at the clock on her small table. 7:17 p.m. She had no time. She had been fired. She was trapped. But she couldn't leave. Not now. Not when she was this close to the truth. She looked at her small window. It faced the back garden. It was a one-story drop to the soft grass. She wasn't going to pack her bag. She wasn't going to let Mrs. Finch drag her to the gate. She put her hand on the window latch, her mind set. She was going to get out, and then, she was going to find a way back in. She had to get to that nursery. She had to get that bottle. The truth wasn't just that Leo could see. The truth was that someone was making sure he couldn't. Clara stood frozen for a second, the slam of her bedroom door echoing in her ears. The click of the lock was final. 10 minutes. That's all she had. She could hear Mrs. Finch pacing in the hallway, her hard-soled shoes making sharp, impatient sounds on the floor. Clara's heart was a trapped bird, beating against her ribs. She was fired. She was locked in. But she wasn't leaving. Not now. The anger came suddenly, cold and sharp, pushing aside her fear. It wasn't just for herself but for Leo. A tiny, defenseless baby, alone in this giant, cold house, being fed lies and medicine. Why would a blind baby need eye drops? The question burned in her mind. She ran to the small window and fumbled with the old, stiff latch. It hadn't been opened in years. She put all her weight into it, gritting her teeth. With a sharp screech of protesting metal, the latch gave way. Clara froze. In the hallway the pacing stopped. Clara held her breath. She didn't dare move. She could hear her own blood roaring in her ears. After an agonizingly long silence, the pacing resumed. Mrs. Finch hadn't heard or hadn't cared. Clara let out a long, shaky breath and slowly, inch by inch, pushed the window open. Cold night air hit her face, smelling of cut grass and damp earth. She looked down. It was about a 10-foot drop to the ground, but directly below was a large, dense hedge of ornamental bushes. It would be a rough landing, but it would break her fall. She didn't hesitate. There was no time. She grabbed her thin room key from the desk, not for the door but as a potential tool, and shoved it deep into her uniform pocket. She sat on the windowsill, swung her legs out into the night and pushed off. She landed hard. The branches of the hedge were stiff and sharp. They scratched her face and tore at her arms and uniform, but they muffled the sound of her landing. For a moment she lay still in the prickly darkness, gasping for breath, thorns digging into her back. She heard a sound from above. Mrs. Finch clearing her throat. 5 more minutes, girl. Be ready. Clara scrambled out of the bushes, ignoring the stinging cuts. She was in the back garden. It was huge and dark, the moon just a pale sliver behind thin clouds. The mansion loomed over her like a sleeping giant, a fortress of dark stone and black windows. Only one light was on, high up on the 3rd floor, Mr. Thorne's office. Good. She knew where he was. She crouched low, her heart pounding, and ran, keeping to the shadows of the massive house. She tried the kitchen door first. Locked as she knew it would be. She moved along the wall of the house, her hands feeling the cold stone, checking every window. Lock, lock, lock. Panic began to set in. How was she going to get back inside? Then she remembered the laundry room. The staff sometimes propped the window open to let the steam out. She ran to the small, low window, hidden behind a trellis of dead vines. She reached for it, her fingers brushing the glass, and it was closed. A sob of frustration rose in her throat. She was trapped out here. But she tried the latch anyway. She pushed her fingers against the frame. It was stiff, but it moved. It wasn't locked. They had forgotten to latch it. With a surge of adrenaline, Clara carefully, silently slid the window open. She looked inside. It was pitch black. She pulled herself up and tumbled headfirst onto a pile of soft, clean-smelling linens. She was in. She lay still for a moment, listening. The only sound was the distant hum of a refrigerator from the kitchen. She pulled off her noisy, hard-soled shoes and left them in the laundry room. In her stockinged feet, she would be almost silent. She opened the laundry room door. It made a low, long creak. She froze, her entire body tensing. She waited, counting to 20. Nothing. No voices. No footsteps. She slipped out into the vast, dark kitchen. The shadows were deep and terrifying. Pots and pans hung from the ceiling like dark, metallic bats. She navigated the large central island, her hands out in front of her. Now for the hardest part. She pushed open the door to the main hallway. It was like stepping into a canyon. The hallway was 2 stories high, built of marble that shined faintly in the moonlight coming from the giant windows at the front of the house. Every statue looked like a person watching her. Every echo sounded like a footstep. The massive grandfather clock at the end of the hall was the loudest thing she had ever heard. Tick, tuck, tick, tuck. Each sound was a hammer blow against the silence, a countdown to her being discovered. She couldn't walk on the marble, her feet would make a sound. She darted to the side, stepping onto the long plush Persian runner that ran the length of the hall. It was softer, quieter. She knew where she was going. The nursery wasn't upstairs. It was in the family wing on the ground floor just past the main living room. She had seen it from the hall when Mrs. Finch was dragging her away. She crept down the hall, past the dark, gaping doorway of the living room, past a portrait of Eliza Thorne, whose painted eyes seemed to follow her in the gloom. Finally she reached it. The nursery door. It was slightly ajar, just as it had been before. A thin sliver of warm yellow light spilled onto the carpet. The night light. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely grab the edge of the door. She pushed it open, wincing at the tiny sound it made as it slid over the carpet. She slipped inside. The room smelled of baby powder, warm milk, and something else. A sharp, chemical, almost metallic smell. Her eyes darted to the crib. Leo was there, sleeping on his back, his chest rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm. He looked like an angel. A wave of protective love washed over Clara, so fierce it almost made her dizzy. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'll figure this out." Then she looked at the table by the rocking chair. There it was. The tray. The prescription box. The small, dark brown bottle. She tiptoed over, her stockinged feet making no sound on the thick rug. She picked up the white prescription box first. Her hands were trembling. The label was printed clearly. Patient, Leo Thorne Doctor, Dr. Alistair Valerius prescription, atropine sulfate 1% ophthalmic solution dosage, 2 drops in each eye every morning. Clara had no idea what atropine was. It was a terrifying, official-sounding word. But the last line of the dosage instructions chilled her to the bone. Every morning. She pulled out her cheap, cracked smartphone. She held it close to her body, shielding the light, and tried to search the name. No service. The thick, stone walls of the mansion blocked everything. "Curse it," she whispered. She put the box down and picked up the small brown glass bottle. The prescription label was on the box, but the manufacturer's label was on the bottle. It was covered in tiny, fine print. She angled the bottle toward the dim glow of the nightlight, squinting so hard her eyes watered. She could barely make out the words. Warning, federal law prohibits. For ophthalmic use only. And then she saw it. A small paragraph at the bottom. Warning, causes significant pupil dilation, resulting in blurred vision and extreme sensitivity to light, photophobia. Not recommended for prolonged use in infants. Clara's knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of the table to keep from falling. It wasn't a mistake. It was a warning. Blurred vision. Extreme sensitivity to light. It all crashed into place. Leo wasn't blind. He was being poisoned. Every morning they put drops in his eyes that made the light hurt him. They made the world a fuzzy, painful, blinding glare. Of course he didn't react to toys. Of course he didn't look at the sunlight. He had been trained to keep his eyes shut, to look at nothing because looking was agony. His blank, empty stare wasn't emptiness at all. It was a defense. But why? Who would do this? The doctor? Mrs. Finch? Mr. Thorne? No, not him. He was grieving. He wouldn't, he couldn't, he came highly recommended. Mr. Thorne's voice echoed in her memory from a phone call she'd overheard. He trusted the doctor. He was just following orders, lost in his own sadness. This was a crime. This was a nightmare. "I have to take this," she whispered, her voice shaking. She grabbed the bottle and the box. This was the proof. This was everything. She turned to go, her heart a wild drum, when she heard a loud thump from the hallway. It sounded like a door slamming. Then a new voice, high and panicked. It was Mrs. Finch. "She's gone, sir. Mr. Thorne. The maid is gone. She went out the window. Her room is empty." Clara's blood turned to ice. She stood frozen in the middle of the nursery, clutching the bottle. She heard heavy, frantic footsteps pounding down the main hall. It was Mr. Thorne. His voice was a low, dangerous growl. "What? Where is she? Find her. She can't have gone far." "I don't know," Mrs. Finch shrieked. "She's in the house. She must be in the house." "The baby?" Mr. Thorne roared. "Check the baby." She was crazy, she was obsessed with the baby. Clara spun around. There was no escape. The one door led straight to them. The closet. She lunged for the large, dark walk-in closet where Leo's clothes were kept. She dove inside, pulling the door shut behind her, leaving it open just a tiny, desperate crack. She huddled in the darkness, surrounded by the smell of clean linens and soft, tiny shoes. She was trapped. She heard the nursery door burst open, slamming against the wall. The bright, blinding light from the hallway flooded the room, cutting a sharp slice through the crack in the closet door. Clara held her breath, pressing her hand over her mouth to silence her own terrified gasps. She peered through the tiny opening. She could see Mr. Thorne's massive shape in the doorway. He was breathing hard like an animal. His face was a mask of pure, white-hot fury. He stormed into the room. "Clara," he bellowed. "I know you're in here. Show yourself." He looked at the empty crib. He looked at the table. He saw the empty spot on the tray. "The drops," he whispered. She took the drops. His head snapped up. His furious eyes scanned the room and then they locked, directly on the closet door. He knew. He was staring right at her. Clara's heart stopped. She was trapped. Mr. Thorne's eyes, burning with a cold fire, were locked on the thin crack in the closet door. He knew. She squeezed her eyes shut, clutching the small brown bottle so hard her fingernails dug into her palm. The chemical smell of the spilled drops on her hand filled the small, dark space. The grandfather clock in the hall seemed to laugh at her. "Get up, Clara." Mr. Thorne's voice was a low, dangerous rumble. He took one step. He was at the closet. He didn't bother with the handle. He gripped the edge of the door and ripped it open, the force of it tearing the wood from its hinges. The door crashed to the floor. Clara screamed, scrambling backward into the hanging rows of tiny baby clothes. Mr. Thorne stood in the opening, a giant, terrifying shadow blocking the light. Behind him, Mrs. Finch's pale, thin face was twisted in a look of triumphant spite. "There she is, the little thief. Just as I said, sir." "Give it to me," Mr. Thorne said, his hand outstretched. He wasn't shouting anymore. His voice was terrifyingly calm. Clara was cornered. She looked from his furious face to Mrs. Finch's evil smile. This was it. This was her only chance. "No!" Clara cried, her voice shaking but suddenly strong. She scrambled to her feet, holding the bottle up like a weapon. "I won't. You have to read it." "She's insane, sir," Mrs. Finch snapped. "Call the police. She stole your property. It's not medicine. It's poison." Clara screamed, the words tearing out of her throat. "You're all being lied to. You're blinding him." The accusation hung in the air, so huge and so awful that it stopped Mr. Thorne in his tracks. He had been lunging forward to grab her, but he froze. He was a smart man. This wasn't the rambling of a crazy person. This was a specific, terrible charge. "What?" he said. "Did you just say?" "Read the label." Clara begged, tears streaming down her face. "Please? I'm just a maid, I know. Who am I? Nobody. But I can read. Look at the warning." "She's lying to save her job, sir." Mrs. Finch shrieked, her voice high and panicked. "She's desperate. Give me the bottle, you wretched girl." Mrs. Finch lunged at Clara. But Mr. Thorne put out his arm, a solid wall of muscle, stopping the housekeeper instantly. He didn't even look at her. His eyes, now filled with a dark, terrible confusion, were locked on Clara. "Why is she so desperate to get it?" Clara asked, her mind racing. "Why don't you want him to read it, Mrs. Finch?" Mrs. Finch's face went pale. "I'm just trying to help. She's upsetting you." "Read it, Mr. Thorne," Clara said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "If I'm wrong you can throw me in jail. But if I'm right, you have to know." Mr. Thorne looked at the bottle in her hand. He looked at Mrs. Finch's terrified, guilty face. He looked at his son, sleeping silently in the crib, unaware of the nightmare. Slowly he snatched the bottle and the prescription box from Clara's hand. His hands were shaking. He, a man who controlled a global empire, could barely hold the tiny box steady. He turned it over, angling it toward the light from the hall. He read the name. Dr. Alistair Valerius. He read the dosage. 2 drops, every morning. And then he read the fine print on the side of the bottle. Clara watched his face. It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. His eyes widened. His face, already pale, turned a ghostly, sick white. His lips moved, silently reading the words. Causes significant pupil dilation, blurred vision, extreme sensitivity to light, photophobia? Photophobia, he whispered. He looked up at Clara, his eyes wide and lost. "What is?" "It means light hurts him," Clara said, her voice breaking. "It's why he never looks at the sun. It's why he won't look at the toys. It's not that he can't see, Mr. Thorne, it's that it's agony for him to try." Mr. Thorne's whole body swayed. He stumbled back, grabbing the railing of the crib to hold himself up. No, he breathed. No. No, it can't be. All the moments, all the months of pain crashed down on him. The specialist who said he was unresponsive to light. The way he'd open the curtains, flooding the room with cheerful sunlight, and his son would just sit there blank. His own frustration. His own despair. He thought his son was broken. But he had been the one hurting him. Every single morning. What have I done? He whispered. The bottle fell from his numb fingers and rolled across the carpet. Sir, it wasn't you. Mrs. Finch said, her voice now high and pleading. It was the doctor. I was just following orders. I'm just a housekeeper. I was doing what the prescription said. Mr. Thorne turned his head, slowly. He looked at Mrs. Finch with eyes that were no longer angry. They were dead. They were filled with an ice-cold void. You gave him these, he said. Every morning. Watched him. You saw him sitting there silent. And you said nothing? I thought it was his condition. I thought. Enough. Mr. Thorne's roar was so loud it shook the walls. And in the crib a sound. A new sound. Not a not a sigh. It was a sharp, terrified gasp. And then, a wail. Leo, startled by the bright light from the hall, the shouting, the terror in the room, began to cry. It wasn't a small whimper. It was a full-bodied, terrified, loud baby scream. Everyone froze. Mr. Thorne, Mrs. Finch, Clara. They stared at the crib. In 8 months, none of them had ever heard him make this sound. The cry was like a knife in Clara's heart. Before she could even think, her instincts took over. She shoved past the stunned Mrs. Finch and ran to the crib. Shoo, 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 she cooed, her hands trembling as she scooped him up. It's okay, Leo. It's okay. I've got you. I've got you. Leo was stiff with terror, his little body rigid, his face red, his eyes squeezed shut. But as Clara held him, rocking him, her voice soft and familiar, he slowly quieted. His crying softened to a whimper. He turned his face, burying it in her neck, away from the light. He clung to her, his tiny, weak hands gripping her uniform. Marcus Thorne watched it all. He watched his son, the son who never moved, who never reacted, who never made a sound, cry from a loud noise. He watched his son, the son who was like a limp doll in his own arms, cling to the maid. He watched his son in a dark room react. It was the final, devastating proof. Clara was right. About everything. Marcus Thorne, the billionaire, the CEO, the man of iron control, slumped into the wooden rocking chair. He put his face in his hands and his broad, powerful shoulders began to shake. He made no sound, but Clara knew he was weeping, his grief and guilt a physical weight that was crushing him. Mrs. Finch stood by the door, her face a mask of pure terror. She knew she was finished. Clara looked at the broken man in the chair and the terrified woman by the door. She was just a maid. She had been fired. But now, holding the trembling, whimpering baby, she was the only one in the room who was in control. Mrs. Finch, Clara said, her voice quiet but strong as steel. Go to your room. Wait there. Mrs. Finch's mouth opened. How dare you? Go, Marcus Thorne said from behind his hands, his voice a low, ruined growl. Do as she says. If you try to leave, if you make one call, I will find you. And I will end you. Now get out of my sight. Mrs. Finch, white as a sheet, turned and fled. Now the room was quiet, except for Leo's soft whimpers and the sound of Mr. Thorne's silent weeping. Clara sat down on the soft rug, never letting go of Leo. She just held him, rocking him, whispering to him. It's okay. The light is gone. You're safe. You're safe now. After a long time, Marcus finally lifted his head. His eyes were red, his face ravaged by guilt. I did this, he whispered. He's my son and I hurt him. Every day. You didn't know, Clara said softly, her eyes on Leo. You trusted someone you shouldn't have. You were grieving. I was a fool, he said, his voice raw. I was so lost in what I lost. I didn't see what was right in front of me. He looked at Clara, his gaze full of a pain she understood all too well. And you lost a child too. It's in your file. That's why you saw what we couldn't, isn't it? You knew what a real baby was supposed to be like. Clara just nodded, a single tear rolling down her cheek. I knew he was in there. I knew he was locked away. How do we fix it? Marcus whispered, his voice that of a desperate, lost child. What do we do? I've poisoned my own son. Will he? He's not broken, Clara said, her voice fierce. He's just been in the dark. We have to show him the light. Gently. We have to teach him that the world doesn't hurt. Marcus nodded, a tiny flickering spark of hope in his eyes. He stood up on shaky legs. He was a man with a new purpose. Not revenge. Not yet. Redemption. All right, he said. Starting now, everything changes. We throw this filth out. No more doctors. No more. He was cut off by a sound from the front of the house. The soft crunch, crunch, crunch of expensive shoes on the gravel driveway. A car door thumped shut. Clara and Marcus looked at each other, their blood running cold. I'm not expecting anyone, Marcus whispered, his body going rigid. Then, from the grand hallway, the sound of the massive front door opening. A man's voice, cheerful, booming, and full of confidence, echoed off the marble. Hello? Marcus. Mrs. Finch. I was just finishing up at the country club and I thought I'd pop by. Time to check on our little patient and drop off his refill. Marcus Thorne's face became a mask of pure, cold, murderous rage. He looked at the prescription box on the floor. He looked at Clara. It's him, he whispered. It's Dr. Valerius. The doctor's cheerful voice bounced off the marble walls, a grotesque, happy sound in the stunned silence of the house. Marcus, Mrs. Finch. Thought I'd pop by. Time to check on our little patient. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at Mr. Thorne. The man who had been weeping in the rocking chair was gone. In his place was someone Clara had never seen before. His back was straight. His eyes, which had been red with grief, were now as hard and cold as chips of ice. A terrifying, controlled calm settled over him. Stay here, he whispered, his voice a low growl. He put a hand on her shoulder. Do not let him out of your sight. And do not, under any circumstances, stop holding my son. Clara nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She pulled Leo closer. The baby had quieted, his small, damp face pressed into her neck, his tiny fists still clutching her uniform. He was her shield and she was his. Mr. Thorne turned and walked out of the nursery. His steps were not loud or rushed. They were heavy, measured, and deadly. Each step on the marble floor was a thud, 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 like a judge walking to the bench. Clara crept to the nursery doorway, staying in the shadows, and watched. Dr. Alistair Valerius was standing in the middle of the grand hall. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed in a light-colored suit, with a friendly, suntanned face and perfect white teeth. He was holding a small paper pharmacy bag. Marcus. My goodness, you look like you've seen a ghost, the doctor boomed, his smile wide. He took a step forward, his hand outstretched. I was just saying I brought Leo's refill. We must be diligent with his. He stopped. Mr. Thorne had not taken his hand. He had simply stood there, staring, his face a mask of cold fury. The doctor's smile wavered. He lowered his hand, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. Marcus, is everything all right? Where is Mrs. Finch? She's indisposed, Mr. Thorne said, his voice like gravel. Oh. Well, no matter, Dr. Valerius said, trying to recover his cheerful tone. He glanced past Marcus down the hall toward the nursery and he saw Clara. He saw her huddling in the shadows, holding the baby. He let out a short, condescending laugh. Ah, the new maid, I assume? Letting her hold him, are we? I've told you, Marcus, it's a wasted effort. The boy can't form attachments. He doesn't have the... He cried, Marcus said. The doctor's words stopped in his mouth. What was that? He cried, Mr. Thorne repeated, louder this time. He took a step toward the doctor. You told me he couldn't. You said his brain was unresponsive. You said he was a shell. But he just cried. A loud noise scared him. Dr. Valerius was no longer smiling. His face had gone stiff. Marcus, grief can make us see and hear things. It's a common reaction. A muscle spasm, a gurgle. And does grief, Mr. Thorne said, taking another step, make him cling? He pointed. Look. Clara, sensing her cue, stepped out from the shadows of the nursery. She didn't say a word. She just stood there in the light of the grand hall, holding Leo. The baby, startled by the new bright lights after the darkness of the nursery, let out a sharp whimper and buried his face again, his hands grabbing Clara's collar. Dr. Valerius stared. He saw a baby reacting. He saw a baby clinging. He saw a baby hiding from the light. His tan seemed to fade. A sheen of sweat popped out on his forehead. What is this? What have you? Photophobia, Mr. Thorne whispered. The doctor flinched as if he'd been shot. Atropine, Mr. Thorne continued, his voice low and shaking with rage. 1%. 2 drops. Every morning. Dr. Valerius's professional mask shattered. He looked from Marcus's face to the nursery, where he could see the open closet, the prescription box on the floor, the overturned bottle. He looked at Clara, who was watching him with cold, knowing eyes. He knew. They knew. Now wait, the doctor stammered, his voice suddenly high and thin. He held up his hands. Marcus, you don't understand the science. It's an experimental treatment. To protect his retinas from atrophy. To keep the eyes healthy while we search for other. Protect him? Mr. Thorne roared, the sound echoing through the hall like thunder. By blinding him? By making the world hurt him? It's a misunderstanding, Dr. Valerius said, taking a step back toward the front door. A misprint on the label. The pharmacy must have. Yes, the pharmacy made a mistake. Then why, Mr. Thorne said, is Mrs. Finch's face white with terror? Why did she try to stop Clara from finding out? The doctor's eyes darted left and right. He was trapped. He saw the fury in Marcus's eyes and knew there was no talking his way out of this. He turned and ran. He lunged for the massive front door, fumbling for the handle. But Marcus, who was half his age and fueled by a year of rage, was on him in 2 strides. Marcus grabbed the doctor by the collar of his expensive suit and slammed him against the wall. The pharmacy bag dropped, the new, full bottle smashing on the marble floor. Where are you going, Alistair? Marcus bellowed, his face inches from the doctor's. It wasn't my idea, the doctor shrieked, his terror finally breaking through. I just did what I was told. It was her. She paid me. Who? Marcus snarled, shaking him. Who paid you? Finch. Mrs. Finch. She said the baby, his crying, it was driving you mad. She said you were on the edge. That this was a mercy. To keep him quiet. To give you peace. It was a pathetic, flimsy lie. A mercy? Marcus whispered. You think this was a mercy? He drew back his fist, his entire body shaking. He was going to kill this man. Mr. Thorne and oh. Clara screamed from the hallway. He's not worth it. Call the police. Make them pay. Don't become him. Her voice cut through his rage. He stopped, his fist trembling in the air. He was breathing like a bull. He looked at Clara, at his son, and then back at the sniveling, terrified doctor. He let him go. Dr. Valerius collapsed onto the marble floor, a heap of expensive clothes, sobbing in fear. Call them, Marcus growled at Clara, his voice thick. Call the police. Get them here. Now. Clara nodded, pulling her phone from her pocket. She dialed 911. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Mr. Thorne. The voice was cold, sharp, and came from the top of the grand staircase. Marcus, Clara, and the doctor all looked up. Mrs. Finch was standing on the landing, bathed in moonlight from the high window. She was no longer in her housekeeper's uniform. She was wearing an elegant, dark-colored suit. And she was holding a small gray object in her hand. Not a gun. A digital recorder. Mrs. Finch, Marcus growled. It's over. The police are on their way. Are they? Mrs. Finch said, her voice calm. She held up the recorder. You see, Dr. Valerius is a fool, but he was a useful fool. Weren't you, Alistair? But he's right about one thing. This was never his idea. We know, Marcus said. It was yours. To keep the house quiet? Is that your defense? Mrs. Finch laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It was cold, sharp, and full of a terrible ancient anger. Quiet? Oh, you poor stupid man. You still don't see, do you? You think this was about you? You think this was about money? She took a step down the stairs. This, she said, her voice dropping, was about justice. Justice? Marcus was confused. For what? Mrs. Finch's eyes filled with a poison that made the atropine look like water. She pointed a long, bony finger at the giant oil-painted portrait of Marcus's dead wife that hung above the fireplace. For her, she whispered. Clara and Marcus stared. For Eliza? Marcus said, his voice full of disbelief. You loved my wife? This was revenge? For her death. Mrs. Finch's face twisted into a snarl. Love her? I hated her. I hated her pretty laughing face. I hated the way she looked at you. I hated the way she stole what was mine. A dark, impossible truth began to dawn on Marcus's face. What was yours? I was his mother's housekeeper, you know, Mrs. Finch said, her voice a low, sing-song, terrifying confession. Long before you. Long before her. I knew your father. I knew your father. The world seemed to stop. Dr. Valerius had stopped sobbing. He was staring, his mouth open. Clara held Leo, her body rigid. You. Marcus couldn't breathe. You. And my father? He was going to leave your mother. For me, she shrieked, her cold composure finally breaking. And then he died. And he left everything to you. His son. And you married her. That nothing. You gave her the house that should have been mine. You gave her the life that should have been mine. This. Marcus was shaking his head, trying to deny it. This is insane. You're insane. Am I? Mrs. Finch smiled, a horrible, sharp-toothed expression. I was here in this house when your precious Eliza started asking questions. She was smart, I'll give her that. She was looking at the old accounts. She was seeing the money your father had been sending me for years. She was going to tell you. She was going to ruin everything. She took another step down. She was a problem. And I solve problems. Marcus's blood ran cold. The plane crash. Mrs. Finch's smile widened. It's amazing what a little mechanical error can do, isn't it? A cut wire here. A loosened bolt there. Such a tragedy. Marcus let out a sound. A low, animal sound of pure agony. He had mourned his wife for a year, and all this time, her murderer had been living in his house. But then, Mrs. Finch continued, her voice light, she left a complication. Her cold, dead eyes moved from Marcus to the baby in Clara's arms. She left another little thorn, set to inherit everything. Everything that was supposed to be mine. So you blinded him, Clara whispered, the final horrific piece falling into place. So he would be invalid. So he couldn't take over. So you could, what? Control him? Control the estate. A blind, broken heir is no heir at all, is he? Mrs. Finch sneered. He'd be pitted, tucked away. And I would be here to help the grieving Mr. Thorne. To take my rightful place. To finally win. It's over, Marcus growled, his voice a low promise of death. You've confessed. You're going to prison for the rest of your life. Am I? Mrs. Finch held up the recorder. This little device has been on for 10 minutes. It has your entire confrontation with dear Dr. Valerius. It has you screaming, threatening him. It has you assaulting him. It sounds dreadful. It sounds like a man who has finally completely snapped. She held up her other hand. It was her phone. And my phone, she said, has a direct line to a reporter at the city paper who loves hearing from me. One call, Marcus, and the world will hear this recording. The world will hear how the grieving billionaire finally went insane, attacked his son's doctor, and locked his faithful housekeeper in her room. They'll never believe you, Marcus snarled. Won't they? Mrs. Finch said. It's your word, against a grieving maid, a terrified doctor, and a loyal lifelong family servant. So messy. The board of directors will hate it. She had them. She had planned for everything. She looked at Clara. Put the baby in his crib. And you will leave. Now, quietly. Or the world will hear this. She looked at Marcus. And you will call off the police. You will let Dr. Valerius go. And you and I will have a long talk about our future. Together. She stood on the stairs, a queen in her dark kingdom, holding all the cards. She had killed his wife, poisoned his son, and now she was going to take his life. Marcus looked at the woman who had stolen everything from him. He looked at Clara, who had given it all back. And he looked at his son, Leo, who was now quiet in Clara's arms, his wide, unfocused eyes staring up at her. He had a choice. Give in and lose his soul. Or fight and risk his reputation, his company, his entire world, for a chance at justice. Clara looked at him, her eyes fierce. She would not back down. She held Leo tighter. Marcus Thorne, a man who had been dead for a year, finally came back to life. He made his choice. Clara, he said, his voice calm and clear, finish the call.